Hello, my name is Brian. I will be teaching you how to bake. Say hi, Katie.
Hi.
This is my assistant. Not just bake, but to bake a delicious dessert out of a plain, old, ordinary vegetable. The vegetable that I'll be baking with is called a butternut squash. This is a butternut squash. Pretty cool, huh? Most people think of a butternut squash and say, "What's that?" Or, "Ew, butternut squash, yuck." The butternut squash is also known as a winter squash. It has a similar taste to a pumpkin. In the native Massachusetts language, the word squash actually means eaten raw or not cooked. The butternut squash is actually high in fiber and vitamins. It is really good for you until I get a hold of it. I've been baking in the kitchen since I was 8 years old. I can still remember my first experience with bacon. You see, us folk from down south, we really like our cinnamon toast. Cinnamon toast is easy to make. All you need is bread, butter, sugar, cinnamon. I can still remember the feeling of accomplishment that I felt after making my own batch of cinnamon toast on my own. I still bake today and I enjoy it more than ever. When baking anything in the kitchen, its most important thing to remember is cleanliness and safety. Always wash your hands in your prep area before preparing your food. Always check the oven to make sure there isn't anything left inside before preheating it, or you will melt things. It happens. Ask anybody. You will need to gather your dry mixing bowls, your measuring spoons, your ladles, your whisk, any other tools that you will need to get the job done. I have a KitchenAid mixer. I received it as an early Christmas present this last holiday season from myself. You will need to prep all the ingredients that you will be using to prepare your recipe. McGraw and Ryan, 2013, wrote, "To avoid disappointment, read the whole recipe before you begin. Make sure you have everything that you need in time to make the recipe. There's nothing worse than starting a project and having to stop and run to the store." Today I will be baking butternut squash casserole. Yes, I know it sounds weird, but once you try this delightful dessert, you will be hooked. I have been preparing this recipe for my family every holiday season for the last 4 years, and it seems to get better every time that I cook it. Finster, MS, 2012, wrote, "An Eastern concept of food preparation suggests that a great chef puts more of his own essence and his own chi into each creation. This casserole is similar to a dessert, souffle, or a custard. For the base or bottom layer of this recipe, you will need 1 butternut squash, sugar, milk, vanilla, salt, flour, eggs, more of this wonderful stuff called butter. For the topping, the upper layer, you will need 8 ounces of crushed vanilla wafers. Yes, these are awesome. In which you crush the wafers. I do it by rolling a can of beans on the wafers in a bag over and over and over again until they are crushed finely. So no, the beans are not part of the recipe. You take the crumbs for the melted wafers or the crushed wafers. You add half a cup of melted unsalted butter and a cup of brown sugar. Once you have all your ingredients in front of you, you can start preparing the recipe. So preheat your oven after checking it, of course, to make sure nothing's in there. I use a potato peeler for the butternut squash to actually remove the outer layer of the squash. Instead of cutting it and trying to scoop it out, it doesn't work. Just use a potato peeler to get to the inside of the squash till it turns orange. Microwave the butternut squash for a couple of minutes until it softens. Once it is ready, cut the ends off. Cut it long ways. Use a spoon to scoop the seeds out just like a pumpkin. And then boil the cubes that you cut out of the butternut squash for about 20 minutes until they are soft. And then you smush them with the potato smasher, like this, until the butternut squash is a puree. In your mixing bowl, combine 3 cups of the butternut squash, sugar, salt, flour, milk, vanilla extract, eggs, and butter. Mix all these ingredients well and pour them into a 9x13 casserole dish and bake for 45 minutes or until it has set. I always use the wiggle trick when baking pies and casseroles. The wiggle trick is just give the pan a nudge, and if the center still wiggles, then it hasn't set yet. While your bottom layer is baking, you can prepare the topping and clean up as you go, of course. For the topping, take your 8 ounces of vanilla wafers, crush them in the bag, pour them into a mixing bowl, melt your butter, dump your butter into the wafers, add your brown sugar, mix it up. And when the bottom layer is done cooking in the oven after 45 minutes and you've done your wiggle test, pull the pan out of the oven, set it on the stove, and sprinkle the topping on top of the pan of the custard. And once you're done with that, put it back in the oven for 10 minutes to allow it to brown. After it's brown, remove it from the oven and let it cool. And here you have it, a butternut squash casserole fit for a king. Let me check mine. Here it is, butternut squash casserole, nicely caramelized between the top layer and the bottom layer. And remember, don't walk away from the oven for too long, and trust your nose, not the timer. This concludes my episode of Baking with Brian.